branches. Within a few years, the park was almost plantless. The herds were so large, they finished the summer food in July and then began eating their winter food. So what's going to happen this winter? They're going to starve to death.
Which is kind of good.
When winter came, many animals died in a slow death of starvation. The scavengers, crows and badgers, grew very large. So there was the population of animals that eats dead things is going to get huge.
I mean, most things eat dead things.
And then there's
Most things
nothing to
don't.
control them.
Right, exactly. The soil
Technically.
that used to hold the plant roots became very loose. So then what's going to happen when it rains?
It's all gonna flood.
It's all good. We're going to have flooding. We're going to have erosion. All of the dirt is going to, turn into a mudslide essentially. The elk had eaten all of the aspen trees that the beavers need to make their dams. So where are beavers going to live? Nowhere. There's no trees for them to cut down to make their houses. What's going to happen to all the rivers and the streams then? If there's no beaver dams to slow them down, what's going to happen to the rivers and streams? They're going to flood. The beavers and streams, did they adapt and use different trees? I mean, maybe. Moved downstream where there were aspens, maybe at first. Died, chances are.
Maybe.
Adults lived and babies were washed away when the dams broke, probably.
Possibly.
The streams moved more slowly with all the debris in them. No.
No.
The streams moved more swiftly without the dams.
Yes.
So we're looking at B, C, D, and F.
Yeah, we were correct.
We were correct. The beavers could not build or maintain the dams. The dams broke, washing away baby beavers. The population of beavers dwindled. Directly connected to this was the change in streams. What were once slow-moving streams became swift rivers. What's going to happen to the water, the fish and the things that live in the water? What's going to happen to them?
They have babies in a wash to live.
They're not going to have a place to live because that big change in the environment, they can't survive that. Hundreds of thousands of birds migrate to Yellowstone for the summer, but now their food was gone. They couldn't build a nest because there were no trees. What's going to happen to the birds then?
They're also going to.
Exactly. The birds died or flew to other places, the population dwindled. The rangers tried to plant aspen and grasses, but the soil did not support the plants as well. The herds ate any new plants right away, so it didn't work. Yellowstone National Park was nearly a disaster. As a result of this, the predators started to come back into Yellowstone. Can you actually really stop that from happening? No, eventually it's going to happen. Bear and mountain lions migrated back into the park. Foxes and birds of prey such as eagles came back. They thinned the herds. Rangers taught people to leave the wildlife alone and to never feed the bears. As we talked about earlier, bears often eat whole fruit, dropping seeds in their feces. How did this help recovery of Yellowstone? It helped plant it and those new seeds started to grow. In 1995, which sidebar, I was in Yellowstone in the summer of 1990, so it was right before this. In 1995, wolves were reintroduced into Yellowstone. Gradually, the following happened. Deer and elk populations leveled out because what was eating the deer and the elk? The wolves. Willow, cottonwood, and aspen trees returned. Beavers returned and built dams. Rivers became salt streams. Migrating birds returned. Moose, otter, and mink thrived in the new marsh habitats. The fish returned. The environment affects those that live in it, and the organisms affect the environment. I'm going to come back and catch the video. What do you think is more important, your genetics or your environment? Okay. Okay. I think everybody's in agreement on that. There's no right or wrong answer. You could feel either way. The expression of genes of this tree were affected by the environment. True or false?
True.
True it is. The expression of genes in this tree were affected by the environment. True or false?
False.
Yeah. There you go. True. No organism is separate from the environment. All of them are affected. It can be a positive or a negative effect, but everything is affected by the environment. Whoops. Okay. Now I'm gonna come back and catch that video. I just hit the wrong button.
Current arrest on me. That's a current arrest on me.
Hey, Madeline. Thanks.
One of the most exciting scientific findings of the past half-century has been the discovery of widespread trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example is what happened in the Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years, but the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up and built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they'd managed to reduce much of the vegetation there to almost nothing. They'd just grazed it away. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though they were few in number, they started to have the most remarkable effects. First, of course, they killed some of the deer, but that wasn't the major thing. Much more significantly, they radically changed the behavior of the deer. The deer started avoiding certain parts of the park, the places where they could be trapped most easily, particularly the valley.
Sorry. Raise your hand if you need a paper copy for tomorrow.
Yeah, I'd like
Okay.
You turn the sound down.
Oh, shoot. How'd I do that?
Areas, the height of the trees quintupled
I
in
get
just
that
6
right?
years. Bare valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. And as soon as that happened, the birds started moving in. The number of songbirds and migratory birds started to increase greatly. The number of beavers started to increase because beavers like to eat the trees. And beavers, like wolves, are ecosystem engineers. They create niches for other species. And the dams they built in the rivers provided habitats for otters and muskrats and ducks and fish and reptiles and amphibians. The wolves killed coyotes, and as a result of that, the number of rabbits and mice began to rise, which meant more hawks, more weasels, more foxes, more badgers. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on the carrion that the wolves had left. Bears fed on it too, and their population began to rise as well, partly also because there were more berries growing on the regenerating shrubs. And the bears reinforced the impact of the wolves by killing some of the calves of the deer. But here's where it gets really interesting. The wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. They began to meander less. There was less erosion. The channels narrowed. More pools formed. More riffle sections, all of which were great for wildlife habitats. The rivers changed in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often, so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of some places and the vegetation recovering along the valley sides, there was less soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, small in number, transformed not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land,